Good morning, my friends. Stout-Hearted 7, Chapter 16, Part 2. Chapter 16, Part 2. November was cold and rainy, and the two stoves in the kitchen and sitting room could warm only part of the house. Gradually, however, with the good care given to them, the sick ones began to recover. Matilda, Frank, and David were soon bouncing around as lively as ever. John as was well enough to help some in the house, though father would not allow him to go outside in the cold. In the mansion house, most of the children felt fine, and mother said she thought they could open the school the next Monday, November 29th. In the Indian camp, however, there was no improvement. In spite of father's desperate efforts, people were dying at the rate of 5 or 6 a day, both children and adults. Some said almost half the tribe had been wiped out. More than 70 people now lived at the mission, 23 in the main house, 29 in the mansion house. Even the blacksmith shop had been turned into a dwelling, and 12 people lived at the sawmill in the mountains. Where had the happy life she had known to disappear, Catherine wondered. There was nothing now but sickness, death, and fear. During this difficult time, Mr. Spaulding arrived with his daughter Eliza. He said he would remain only a few days and at night could roll up a blanket on the floor, as he had done many a time. Eliza, on the other hand, would stay all winter, and somehow mother squeezed in a cot for her. A messenger riding over from Umatilla brought word that 5 Crows, the one truly Christian chief of the Cayuse, who had been baptized by Mr. Spaulding, wanted father to visit his sick people. "Come with me, Brother Spaulding. The chief would be glad to see you again," father urged. They set off on horseback together the next morning, Friday, November 26th, leaving mother to care for the sick ones, most of them who were now on the mend. Catherine and Elizabeth, who shared the big bed in the sitting room, would soon be up again. Little Henrietta was also improving, but Helen and Louise seemed worse, if anything. Mother was on her feet constantly from the time father left until Sunday evening, when John said, "Go lie down a while. Frank and I will stay up. If there is any change in the girls, we'll call you." From her bed, Catherine watched mother walk unsteadily from the room. She did not look like the strong, capable woman they had known these 3 years. Something terrible seemed about to happen. Catherine shivered and moved closer to Elizabeth. "If only the Indians would stop that wailing," her sister groaned. Soon, however, she went to sleep, but Catherine could not. She jumped in terror when she heard the outside door open, but seeing it was father, she lay back relieved. Now that he was here again, things would be better. He looked exhausted, but before he would even sit down, he went the rounds of the beds, examining the children. Looking at Helen and Louise, he shook his head. "Boys, you might as well go to bed. I'm going to sit up for a while," he said. After John and Frank had gone upstairs, mother came from the room to sit with him. Catherine heard him say in low voices that Stickus, his faithful friend who lived at Umatilla, had told him Joe Louis was going from lodge to lodge, whipping up the Indians' anger. They were holding nightly councils, planning when and where to kill him. "Is this the end for us, husband?" "Somehow, I don't believe it is. It is bad, but we have had bad times before and have come out all right. Go back to bed, my dear. I'll keep watch. I fear we cannot save these two." He gestured toward Helen and Louise. After mother had gone away, weeping, Catherine asked father, "Are we all going to be killed?" He came to sit on the edge of her bed and stroked her hair. "I don't think so, child. We still have some good friends among the Indians." Soothed by his words, she drifted off to sleep. When she woke, morning had come. Through the windows in the sitting room, she could see the sky was dark and dreary, threatening rain. Elizabeth was already dressed and said she felt well again. Catherine, too, felt well. She hurried into her clothes. They went into the kitchen. Here in the warm room, bright with candlelight, Frank was setting the table and Father was cooking steak for breakfast. He said Mother was not feeling well and would stay in bed for a while. Matilda danced into the room, threw her arms around Father, and kissed him. Then Eliza Spaulding came in and, seeing Dr. Whitman, asked about her father. He did not come back with me, the doctor explained. His horse fell on him and bruised his leg, but he'll be all right. He will probably come tomorrow. Elizabeth noticed the doctor dishing up the food. Should I take some to Mother? That would be a good idea. He filled a plate and she went off holding it carefully. In a few minutes she was back. Mother has been crying, but she said it was thoughtful for me to bring her breakfast. I set the plate on the stand. After they finished eating, the girls began washing the dishes while Father talked to Mr. Rogers about the trouble that seemed hanging over the mission. I'm going to do everything I can to please the Indians this winter, Father said. If things are not better by spring, I shall move my family to the Dells. Just then, Mother came into the room looking calm again and more like herself. As always, she was neatly dressed and had pinned her lovely, bright hair back tightly. She did this every morning, though by noon some would be loosed from the knot at her neck and little wisps would be curling around her face. Catherine thought again how pretty she was. Judge Saunders told me yesterday he was ready to begin school today, she announced cheerfully. The children have been unoccupied for so long that it will be good for all who are well enough to have something to do. Am I well enough? Matilda asked. Yes, I think you and Frank and the Manson boys and David are all well enough. And Eliza, of course. I hope you don't take the measles, Eliza, but I doubt if you will now. How about Elizabeth and me? Asked Catherine, who dearly loved school. No, I think you two and Mary Ann should wait a few more days, Mother replied. The schoolroom is drafty and you might take cold. Anyhow, you must have baths first. John, will you please bring the tub into the sitting room and set it beside the stove? Then I can keep watch of the sick children while I bathe the others. Father stood up to leave, saying he had to go to an Indian child's funeral this morning. He wanted the parents to know he sympathized with them. Mary Ann was the first to have her bath. When she was dressed again, she went into the kitchen where John sat, watching a pot of meat cooking for dinner and keeping the fire going while he wound a hank of string into a ball. Broom making was to be the next job, and it took a lot of string. Matilda bounced into the kitchen for a drink of water. Hey, hold this hank for me, will you? John asked. I can't. I'm only out for recess. I'll do it for you at noon. She dashed off. In the sitting room, Catherine finished her bath and began dressing. Elizabeth sat in the tub while Mother soaped her back. Father came in and dropped down in a chair near the stove. Cold out, he said, rubbing his hand. A strange thing. Not many came to the funeral, but there seemed to be more Indians around than usual. The men are butchering cows this morning, Mother said. The Indians always wait for their share. At that moment, a knock came at the closed door leading into the kitchen, and when Mother went to answer it, Catherine could see Tamaha standing there. This was unusual, since the Indians were not supposed to come into the house. She heard a word or two exchanged, then Mother said, Doctor, you are wanted. Father went to the door, then turned. Catherine saw a strange look spread over his face. Mother, bolt the door behind me. Everything happened so fast that it was hard for Catherine to remember afterwards just how it had been. She heard loud voices, a blow, a thud of someone falling, John's cry that was quickly cut off. Then Mary Ann appeared at the front door. She had run around the house from the kitchen. She was so terrified that she could hardly speak, but managed to gasp, The Indians are killing Father and John! Okay, my friends, this doesn't sound so good. We'll do chapter 17 tomorrow.